along through Ole Miss studying acting for a bit?
I learned a lot here, mostly that I was not an actor.
Ended up getting a degree in playwriting, and then you taught at Mississippi State for a smidge too. And then eventually went out to Savannah. He's been at SCAD for 17 years in various high-powered roles. So that's quick bio. You'll hear a little bit more. I just wanted to tell you briefly about the books, which are all amazingly so good. World's Largest Man was about the upbringing in rural Rankin County. The man in question is Harrison's father, a gruff asphalt salesman who cares for hunting and fishing and violence, and the boy who wanted to play chess and do all the secret reading of Dean Koontz, and learning to love a difficult man and learning how to get perspective on what it means to come from a difficult place and a difficult family and learn to accept the place and who you are. I teach a class called Mississippi Writers, and this is my students' favorite book. So you should get this before you leave. Okay, second book is Congratulations, Who Are You Again, which is a memoir about writing the first book, and it is way better than that sounds. So in this book, he talks about what it means to have a dream, and his dream, of course, is to be a great American writer. He follows the story of writing and publishing his first book. Anyone who loves to read and is curious about the writer's life should definitely read this book. He gives away all the secrets. He says the things that no writer ever says. For example, he confesses how much he made for his advance. No one does that.
I'm sorry.
No, it's so good. Shocking all the secrets in here. And this book is also bigger than it sounds, because it's about how we choose to make a life and what it means to make sacrifices to have your dream come true, and what it means to ask other people to make sacrifices for you. So then we come to our third book, newly published, much praised already, How to Stay Married, the Most Insane Love Story Ever Told, true to its word, deeply insane, because it's about infidelity to start off with. So I'm going to ask the question, the softball question, that probably everyone is wondering. Harrison Scott Key, what the hell were you thinking?
Thank you for that question, Beth Ann. Thank you all for coming. The short answer is, I can't help it. It's just my nature to write amazing books. It's just something I do, and I mean, I could get kidnapped by a werewolf and befriend it, and then we could go on adventures together, and I would write that book, because that happened to me. I'm frankly excited about maybe not writing about my life in my next book, but up until now, it just felt like something that I had to do. I just love telling stories, and anybody in this room who knows me, I love to tell stories and make people laugh. And when this story happened to me, I found myself, as you will read in the book, I told my closest friends and asked for help, and in some ways they knew what was happening, because it was sort of so obvious if you knew my family. And when I was telling them, it was funny and sad all at the same time. Not funny like ha-ha, but funny like, holy cow, that really happened. And so it started as letters to my wife, and then it kind of became just like journaling, and I don't journal. Anybody who tells you they journal doesn't. Nobody does that. But I was writing this down, and at some point I was like, I unfortunately think this may be a book. And so it became a long discussion with my wife, and I gave her, and this is the end of the answer, about a year and a half after we reconciled, I handed her the manuscript. Actually, no, I said, hey, I think I'm going to write a book about this. And she started crying, and that's funny, thank you for laughing. And I said, just kidding, and then I didn't bring it up again for a year. And then when I finished the book, I handed her the manuscript. I said, if you don't love this, I will burn it. And I was lying, of course. But fortunately, she loved it. And then she said, it's missing one thing. I want to write something for it. And so she wrote a chapter for the book as well.
Yeah, I love that she wrote a chapter and we get to hear her voice. I also love that early on, as a reader, I started getting really nervous. And early on, you mentioned at the end of the book that she gets a chapter. And it gave me peace as a reader to know that I would also get to hear her side of it, that it wasn't going to be one-sided. But as I read the book, I actually ended up getting less nervous and less, filled with tension, because I saw that you were allowing your wife Lauren to be a very developed character, and we end up feeling a lot of empathy for her, because she's going to be the bad person. She cheats on her husband, right? Except we end up learning about her life, and then you yourself turn such a critical eye and do so much reckoning that you share with us. At one point in the book, you say something like, "If this book is a hit job, my pride is the target." And there were so many insights into how your wife could have gotten to a place where it seemed her only way out was to have an affair.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what it's like to create empathy for someone and not go too far overboard, but allow us to know that character?
Well, everybody's complicated, and the most interesting characters in real life or in literature are full of paradox. For example, I'm really good looking, but why are you laughing? And so I knew that was the challenge with this book. If I say, my wife had this affair, then immediately she's the bad guy and I'm the good guy. And that's a really hard place to be in as a writer, because in memoir, really, the writer is the villain in the story, the one who sort of exposes himself or herself to who shows you all of their faults and shows you them fumbling, stumbling, being an idiot, being a jackass, whatever. And I knew that would be the challenge, and I thought, well, if you learn what we were like before all this happened, and I have to assume that somebody reading this hasn't read all of my other books, but what you read about Lauren in this book gels with all of that other stuff. You find that my wife is much more likable than I am. And I just thought, well, I just can show her talking, because she's such a funny person. And she gets me, and she gets what's wrong with me. Everybody else does too, but she can say it. And so I'm like, well, why don't I just let my wife sort of speak and show people who she is? And when I gave the manuscript to her, I was like, if there's anything in here you don't remember saying, or that you don't remember saying like that, like, you change it, you tell me. And so she was really my first editor and my fact checker for the book.
It was interesting to read her chapter to discover that she's also a very good writer.
I know, that really upset me. Doing it for decades. Yeah. And then literally, first of all, it was awesome, because I was like, so you're going to write something? And I was like, all right, I'm going to give you just some pointers. I was like, don't hate me. I was like, just right away, just go right. Don't worry, maybe it's 20,000 words, maybe it's 5. And she's like, I'm fine, I got it. And then she had the laptop, and she was going around the house. And normally it's me who she's saying, can you help? And I'm writing. And if you're a writer or if you're a workaholic, you know what that's like. I would always be typing, writing, at any time of day. And she's always getting the kids in the car to go to the beach or unloading groceries. And she's like, can you help? And I'm like, just 1 second. This is a really amazing paragraph. And now all of a sudden that was her. She would be writing all over the house, and the dog would be eating one of the children. And I'm like, can you help? And she's like, just 1 second, please. And I was like, what did you say? And I was like, can we just get can somebody recognize what's happening? It was really awesome that I think she realized what it must have been like to be me all those years trying to write. And then when she wrote, it was so good. And it didn't, I was really worried that it would sound a little like me, because she's so used to hearing my voice on the page. And it doesn't sound like me at all.
Her syntax is completely different. Her sentences are a lot shorter,
yes.
But I thought I'd share with you just one little part so you can get a sense of Lauren's voice that comes in at the end. So she was talking about being back in her church with Harrison when everybody in the church knew that she had left her husband and done all these things. I mean, it was just not a secret. She says, when I was growing up, my grandmother would often say, I'm sweating like a whore in church. As a kid, I assumed this imaginary whore was sweating in church because she knew Jesus was watching her and scowling his disapproving scowl. But now I know. The whore is not sweating in church because of Jesus. She's sweating because of all the Christians.
And that's the title of her chapter, A Whore in Church,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
So that brings me to two other things I want to talk about. One is I really love how this book is also a spiritual memoir. Because I think in literature, like in life, we tend to handle religion only from two areas, two directions. One is completely earnest and unquestioning and easy, and the other is wry and sardonic and doubting everything. And so it was really interesting to me to see someone writing about religion in such a way as saying not having all the answers, trying, failing. Do you want to talk about how it was like to write about religion?
Well, I always tell my humor students that you really, like, when you're, I feel like now on social media, everybody loves to make fun of everybody else and attack everybody else on the other side of the street. But really, you have to start at home. Like, I have them draw concentric circles and put themselves in the middle, and the first circle is their family. They can make fun of you can make fun of your family better than anyone else, right? Because you know what's really messed up about them. And then after that, it's your neighborhood, your community, maybe it's your state, like Mississippi, and I make a lot of fun of Mississippi. And what's so awesome about that in the first book is that when I make fun of Mississippi, it's the people from Mississippi who laugh the most when I do that. And so I understand Christians. I was raised in the church. I'm still a Christian. I still go to church. And so I can make fun of them better than pagans can. Because I've suffered through it, and through long, terrible sermons in Sunday schools. And I can also say what's beautiful about it, too. And so I will say that before the events of this book happened and, like, exploded in my life, I was actually writing essays about Christianity. And just kind of toying, like, maybe is this a book? Is it a memoir? Is this just going to go in an essay collection one day along from now? I didn't know. I was already talking about it, and it was so much fun. Like, I wanted to write, it's really easy to make fun of anybody, any group in America. And it's especially easy to make fun of any group who, as a rule, take themselves very seriously. And the thing is, every group takes themselves very seriously. But man, Christians are really good at that. And when I was at a previous church, I had written some funny essays about faith. They kind of like were passed around among the church. Like I could see like disapproving scowls. That's how I knew it was good. When all of the unfunny people were like, "This isn't funny." I'm like, "You don't think anything is funny, man." So I was already sort of getting there. And then when all of this happened, I was like, I think I was on to something with that, because when you're sort of faced with a life or death situation, and in this book many times over I was faced with life or death situations, you're looking around for solid ground. You're looking around for wisdom. And as a child of the church and as a Christian, the first place I went was the Bible. There's a whole chapter in the book about reading the Bible and trying to read it with fresh eyes. I was just looking for wisdom. In a sense, for me, faith was like, when you grow up in the church, you just hear the same things over. I know some of you out here are pastors. I'm so sorry. But you hear the same things over and over again. And all the beautiful metaphors of the King James Version, they all get stale after a while. And so for me, when all this happened, I was looking for wisdom. I was Googling for wisdom. Don't ever do that. Don't Google for wisdom. And it was like, in a sense, the sort of ancient parts of my faith were like old tools in the tool shed. You know, sometimes you buy an old house and you go out in the barn out back and there's like a bunch of old tools. And you're like, what does that do? What do they kill with that? You know, like just weird, rusty things. And that's sort of what it was like. It was like, at my lowest point, I was like, wait, I've got some tools like that can help me figure out like ultimate things. What do I do? Like, what does a man do when his wife the Sunday school teacher has an affair with the next door neighbor. What do you do? And like, if this has ever happened, one thing I learned when you write a book about this, you learn how much it happens because people message you all the time and tell you crazy things. And I thought, I mean, every day you're faced with a decision that's like life or death, with your kids, with your job, with your career, with your home. I mean, my wife, you know, she was like, she thought I was going to storm out, and then this guy was going to move into my house with my kids. And I'm like, what do I do? Like, I did want to storm out, and then I wanted to burn all of her clothes in the yard. And I'm like, should I do that? I mean, that's a real thought. And if you've ever been betrayed, you know, like, that's a very powerful thought. Should I go hurt this man? Rage, like Old Testament rage, like that felt like really appropriate. I had friends who were like, dude, I've got guns, man. We can go find this guy. I was like, it felt more like a baseball bat situation to me. You can hold him down. So you're faced with all these really ultimate questions, and you really don't know where to turn. Yeah. And so for me, I was like, you know what? I'm going to open up this Bible, and I'm going to read it with fresh eyes. I started with the Psalms because I ran out of things to pray, like just help me, help me, help me. And so I was reading the Psalms, and these Psalms are sort of like prayers if you don't know what to pray. And then I went to the Proverbs, and I'm like, I'm going to start from the beginning. And so because of what had happened in my life, all the stuff that had gotten so old and tired and flat took on totally new life for me and really helped me figure out, I mean, what's that verse? Do justice and love mercy. Like, that sounds like a paradox. How do you do that? Justice is not merciful. Mercy is not just. And yet this book is like putting these like Jedi riddles to you. And so that gave me a lot of strength to dive into that and realize none of the answers will be easy.
One interesting experience I had reading this book was understanding how valuable humor can be. Because in the first two books, the humor made them so enjoyable, but in this book, humor made it endurable. Oh. You know, and I felt like it was endurable for you, but endurable for me as a reader because I couldn't stop laughing. And there, I wanted to ask a little bit about how your humor has, you know, even changed over the three books. But in this book, you know, there's actually one whole paragraph. The whole paragraph's metaphors about how bad their marriage had become. You know what I mean? And it's just like you, as a writing teacher, you know to tell your students, like, you know, don't you too many similes, you get one per page. You know what I mean? You're just really screwing me up, Harrison. I thought, in fact, you might be able to talk just a little bit about humor writing via your second book, and where you talk about, so I actually picked out 4 short paragraphs for you. So do you want to start here
Sure.
and read to here, and then I will drill you with questions?
Yeah, love that. Here to there, okay. I began to note certain techniques, how misdirection and surprise were essential, for example. One must write the very thing one is not expected to write at that moment in the sentence. There's a prestidigitation to it. Incongruity reigns. One describes a strange thing plainly, a plain thing strangely. Rhythm also. As Seinfeld once said, it's more like writing a song than a sentence. Most especially, I began to note a kind of weird expressionistic warping of facts in funny writing, the way Van Gogh painted cypresses. You can tell these are trees he's painting, but he torques them, makes them look like black fire. He doesn't make them not trees, he just makes them look to your eyes the way they look to his bewildered heart, like dark, windswept flame. I began to see this candid distortion all around me. I find myself noting the many remarkable ways people walk and run. How some young woman jogging in the park would let her arms hang all weird, like they weren't even there. Like she didn't even know she had arms, even though I was pretty sure she knew she had arms. That's the factual distortion that gets to the truth, which is the woman runs weird. I started writing more in this way, the way Francis Bacon paints faces, the way George Bellows paints bodies. It wasn't lying. I was merely attempting to show the reader how ridiculous the thing looked to my heart, such that ideas and objects were distorted, brighter, bigger, Fauvist, post-impressionist, some details omitted, ignored, others heightened, lit on fire so you could see them from space.
I love that analysis of how you discovered humor through as a reader, and then what you did to find your own original voice, your kind of stylistic fingerprint. Would you say your understanding of how to write humor is the same in the third book as it was in the first two?
No, I mean, in a way, yeah. Like, I've always been me, and I'll always be me.
I'm sorry about that.
I know. And so there's a through line to it. But it's definitely, I mean, in that first book, I was going 100 miles an hour. If you read World's Largest Man, I was so sick of people telling me books were funny and then giving me the books and they weren't funny. I was so mad about that. And I was like, I want a book that, now with humor is weird. You either like it or you don't from the top. You know, a funny book will put people off from the first page, or they'll fall in love from the first page. And you just have to accept that. Some people are not going to like whatever the comic writing style is, and I knew that about myself. But I wanted to write a book that was going so hard and was not going to let up. I remember, reading Neil Simon's memoir, and he talked about, writing, they had to have 3 jokes per page. And in a page of script, that's 3 jokes per 100 words. And so for me, like, a page of a book is about 300 words. I'm like, all right, 9 jokes a page. That's what it's going to be. And I went there, and I had people that are like, man, that's too much. I'm like, I just wanted to see if I could do it and make it funny. I mean, obviously in the editing, I pulled back a little bit. But with the second book and now with the third book, you could say that maybe I've gotten more confident to pull back a little bit. I mean, everybody always says this, and it's so annoying because they're probably right. They're like, it's not your funny stuff that I like the most. It's when you're serious. And I'm like, shut up. Like, I want a book that makes me laugh and that makes people laugh like you guys just did. So I think I have more confidence to let the serious stuff happen and let that fill the page too. Because what's so cool about comedy is that it's the only kind of writing where you know if it works instantly when you read it in front of people. You taught a humor class, haven't you? Or you taught, if you've ever taught a humor class, that's like the saddest class you can ever teach. Because when in a serious writing class, if somebody reads something, and it doesn't work, you can't tell. Everybody's just like, wow, yeah. And everybody's quiet. And they're supposed to be quiet when they listen to stuff. But in a humor class, my students would be reading something, and then nobody laughs, and it's so embarrassing and so painful. That's what I love about humor, not just in a literary sense, but it's a real truth detector. If people are laughing, something is true in what they are hearing. And that's what I love about it. I often don't know what's true in my own life. I often don't know what's real. I don't know what's the right move in any given situation. And so for me, all of my life, I could stay safe if I could make people laugh. That kept me from getting too far. And then when they stopped laughing, I was like, all right, bring it back, Harrison. They're not laughing anymore. Maybe I've gone too far. But I've always used that as a way to keep myself grounded. And I think I have a little more confidence now, so it doesn't always have to be funny. I'm not doing this, but for my next book, I almost made a deal with myself to try to write a book with not one funny line in it. I think that would be sad for people, but at least maybe a chapter, just to see if I could do that. I think I have a little more confidence now to do that.
Well, I would love to hear you read, and I'm sure the audience would like that as well.
Sure.
Great. And then after, if y'all have some questions, we'd be happy to have them from your side.
All right. This is going to be really good. I'll just read you some bits that I've sort of put together here. The subtitle is "The Most Insane Love Story Ever Told," and that's one of my bits of advice for young couples. Is if you want to stay married, I say getting married is fun because you're so good looking when you're young, but staying married is insane. What makes staying married an insane proposition is that your partner will hurt you and you will hurt them over and over again in ways large and small. And you have to forgive it all, even more than 7 times, 70 times. This continual forgiveness makes you feel insane. For some people, it's hard to imagine my needing to forgive my sweet, funny wife for anything. Everybody who's read my work wants to be her friend. She's so funny. A love of laughing and making others laugh is what made us fall in love. It's unfair that a woman who was homeschooled could be so beautiful. But under all that beauty was a hilarious hypochondriac who couldn't stop making jokes about her own death. We were funny because we were sad for different reasons, family stuff, personal loss, the usual. Our jokes were a way to deal with pain, but pretty soon they became a way to inflict pain. She made fun of me, so I made fun of her, which was easy since she was homeschooled. Still, we had a good life, 3 beautiful kids, but we grew apart, and then the worst happened. What happened was my wife for a billion years, the hilarious, caring mother of our 3 daughters, a woman who spent just about every Sunday of her life in a church, fell in love with someone else. She was in love with him for years, and I was clueless, a fool. If you think this could never happen to you, join the club. I thought that once too. 1 in 4 marriages experiences infidelity. If you're a man, you're more likely to commit infidelity than you are to play a musical instrument. If you're a woman, you're more likely to have an affair than you are to have bangs. I Googled it. I've been in many weddings, and never have I heard a single officiant explain the crucible of suffering that awaits every married couple. They say things like, "You'll have ups and downs," and we just smile. I've never heard an officiant turn to the bride and groom and say, "You two will both grow extraordinarily comfortable with daily fantasies about the other being thrown from a speedboat and the body never recovered." But it's true. Every married person here knows it, even if they're too afraid to admit this. A man I know once asked his wife, "What would you do if I won the lottery?" She replied, "I'd take half and leave you." "Great," he said. "I won $12. Here's $6. Keep in touch." Before I continue, I should say that it was my faith, our faith, I should say, that helped keep us married. I am a Christian. It is important to understand this bewildering fact about me because my weirdo religious faith shapes everything in our story. For many of my readers, Christianity is pretty insane. It is. It can sometimes feel insane to subject yourself to an ancient religion that dares you to live according to a collection of primitive writings featuring more murder and foreskin content than is perhaps advisable for young children. The central theme of its stories being that everyone should imitate the strange behaviors of a divine hayseed born in a Palestinian cowshed to an 8th grader who just woke up one day pregnant. But I actually believe the Christmas story really happened. I've known many teenage mothers who are virgins. They're called Baptists. I'll read a little bit. That was good. Okay, this little bit, I'll read this little bit and then we can talk some more. So, I'm going to take a water break. Drinking water in front of people who are watching you is so hard. You guys should try it. Everybody's like, "He's drinking water. Can he do it?" So, there are a lot of twists and turns in this story. You think you know how it's going to end, and then all of a sudden, this is what my experience was living through it. And then things went sideways again. So at some point, my wife leaves, and I become the single parent of 3 young daughters, which there's a lot of comic potential in that as well. It was pretty awful, but pretty funny too. And so after she left, I started sort of imagining new futures for myself. One day I took off my wedding ring and decided what I needed to do was move on. Word got around that my wife and I were separated, and suddenly I started receiving many DMs from hot single moms. Many of the messages were from women who'd been cheated on, and I learned that the experience of infidelity inducts you into a secret club of others like yourself, likewise betrayed, who emerge like mushrooms after a summer rain, to tell you of their anger and their loneliness and their healing yoga practice, which has made their bodies stretchy. Some of these women were still healing, and some were healed, and most were probably very stretchy. I flirted with every woman I met. I played a game with myself called, "Could I marry her? Could I marry the hobo lady in the park? The chiropractor's receptionist? The handsome lady in the Tremfya advertisement with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis? Yes, please. I even went on a few dates, and they did not go well, because I cried a lot. Nothing turns the ladies on like a man weeping on a date. Separation was hell. I cried so hard one night I woke up with abs. I went to some pretty dark places I hadn't been to in a long time, like the grocery store. Did you know they have sushi at the grocery store now? And did you know that kitchen floors have to be swept every day? Because I didn't. And the hair. My daughters have so much hair. I don't know anything about hair. I haven't had hair since Bill Clinton was president. To fight for my marriage, you know what I did? I fought the hair. I fought the toilet bowls. I beat the crap out of the laundry. I revolutionized the production of school lunches. I pampered myself with luxurious, affordable new lotions. Yeah, I'll do this last paragraph since you guys are enjoying this so much. So we do reconcile. That's a spoiler alert. We do stay married, and I want to. I could write a whole book about what happened after that reconciliation happened, but I do talk a little bit about that in the book. We found a great therapist. We slept in separate beds for a long time. We made it to 1 week, 1 month, a year, then 2, each day slightly less weird than the one before. Rebuilding broken trust is a little like rebuilding someone's face after a disfiguring chainsaw accident. It can be done, but it'll look different for a while, maybe forever, until one day it looks mostly normal, or you stop noticing the scars or caring much when you do. In therapy, we don't talk about the affair anymore. Though, to be honest, we never talked about the affair much at all. I mean, we did. But after we unloaded our story on Dr. Berman, he hardly ever asked about it again. He tossed the affair aside like a dirty diaper. For our therapist, and eventually for Lauren and me, the affair was a MacGuffin, a brutal plot device that activated the real questions. Who are we? What is our duty to each other in this nasty and brutish life? We've changed so much, though none of our change has come easy. Our division of labor is now radically progressive. I do 1 million times more housework than I once did. I now do at least half of the grocery shopping and cooking. It still takes threats of violence to get me to help with fitted sheets, but I now empty the dishwasher unprompted, which is a kind of miracle. The best thing about our new marriage is that my wife no longer has a boyfriend. In that sense, it's more traditional. I'll stop with that.
Awesome, Harrison. Thank you so much. Let's have some questions from you guys.
None.
Go ahead.
Your first editor, did she have a lot of recommendations and suggestions, and did you argue over any?
What can you repeat what I was looking for? I found it in
Your
the back.
first editor, meaning your wife.
My wife, yes.
Did
thank
she
you.
have a lot of suggestions for you?
Not really. There were a couple of. So she was right about this, but it was funny. Her biggest suggestion was she said, "Okay, you're gonna hate me for saying this," and I was like, "Give it to me, come on." And she goes, so the name of the guy she had an affair with, I called him Chad in the book. That's not his real name. She goes, "I think you're too mean to Chad." And I was like, "Oh, really?" Oh, girl. And she laughed and she was like, I know, of course that's what I'm going to say. She goes, "But he gets kind of old." And I was like, okay, well, I'll see about that. So what I did is I went through the manuscript and I highlighted every time I made a dig at him. And any time he came up, I made a dig because I felt like it was I had to do that. I felt like I had to be like, and I'm awesomer than he is, and then say why. And it did get old. And so what I did, and she was exactly right. And so what I did, that was not an emotional edit. That was a real edit. She was saying she said to her it was compromising my authority with the reader to keep going back and making digs at this guy. And she was right. So what I did is I took all of those insults and I put them all in one chapter. So I told her, I was like, so I'm not deleting them. And so what I did is and there's one chapter where it's called Notes on Chad. And I just dumped them all there and I kind of get it off my chest. And I'm like, you know what? I'm moving on. This book really isn't about this guy. He's really a totally oblique character in the book. He's in the wings, like, somebody in Greek tragedy. He's off the stage. And so I get all that out of the way. It's very cathartic, and then I move on. And I don't really make any other references to him other than just purely factual references. So that was a really great bit of editing advice she gave me.
I love knowing that because structurally, I can see how it would be predictable if every time you mention Chad, you took a dig at him, and instead to lump it all together and just to go full at it. I have to say there's a point later in the book though when you go to where your wife is living with Chad and you steal his cell phone charger, and it's really kind of awesome and hard not to be. It was so petty, Harrison.
I actually think I say that in the book. I said I'm something like I'm a petty man when I need to be.
Yeah.
Well, I thought about stealing his guitar. He can't play the guitar. I've heard him play. He's my neighbor for 10 years. He's terrible at it. But I do. There are a couple of digs. I say, in the last chapter, I say that my wife and I have had to come to terms with some difficult truths. And for example, I've had to come to terms with the fact that my wife left me for a man who probably cannot name the vice president. And that was hard.
And wears cargo shorts on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know what he's got in his little pocket.
There's a question here in the third row. Go ahead, sir.
From your remarks, it seems like that you started writing the book before you knew it was going to have a happy ending. Would you have published the book had it not had a happy ending?
You bet I would. He said, I started writing, he said, it sounds like you started writing the book before you knew how it would end. So yes, I would have written this book if it was going to have a happy ending either way. I believe in hope. And it might have taken longer to have a happy ending. When I told my agent about it, she was like, "Dear Lord, what?" And she was horrified because she knew my wife, obviously, knows my wife. So she was horrified for me at that level, and then she was horrified for me as an agent too. She goes, "Well, what if she comes back?" And because she was gone at this point when I was writing the book, I was like, "Well, it'll have a happy ending if she comes back." And she goes, "Well, what if she doesn't?" I was like, "Then it'll have a happy ending if she doesn't." Because whatever happens, I felt was going to be the right thing to happen. And it would have, in a way, the great wartime journalism, the Rolling Stone used to publish, they published this great journalism during the Vietnam War. Michael Hurd and some other really great writers. And it was like frontline journalism. They were writing from the front lines and sending these back. And they were published in the magazine. And in a way, the book was like that for me. It was very fresh. Would have been a little bit different if I had waited 5 years, 10 years. Yeah, it would have been definitely different. But because it was so fresh, I felt like it needed to get out.
Yeah.
I felt in a way, us telling our story, whether it was in a book or just to our community, was going to be a big part of our healing. And so after we finished the manuscript, including Lauren's chapter, we read them at church in front of everybody. And we invited a bunch. It's a small church. There's probably about this many people at our church. I'm the church drummer, so if that gives you a sense of the taste level at our church is very low. And so we both decided that we wanted to. So usually in the summers, our church does this thing where people will come in and there'll be a panel discussion on something that's happening. Like my mom this week is giving a panel on old people. She's old, so she's an expert. So I can't be there, which I'm bummed about. But anyway, we do these panels and stuff, and so I was like, we should just read some of this stuff in front of everybody. Everybody that we love and care about and who loves and cares for us already knew what was happening because they were there bringing whiskey and casseroles to my house when it was happening. So we weren't some people were like, how can you talk about this? What is your church going to think? I'm like, man, if my church doesn't know about this yet, it's the wrong church. I shouldn't be there. And that goes for our community of friends, too. And so we invited lots of folks, not just people from our church. And I read some, and then Lauren read some, and her chapter's heavy. You've read it. If you read the book, like, it's heavy. And she read it. I mean, she was bawling. By the time it was over, like, everybody was crying. Like, about every other married man in the audience just had that, like, 1,000-yard stare. And they wouldn't make eye contact with me for, like, a month after that. This is scary. This is a very scary topic. If you're not married, it's scary. If you are married, it's scary. This is really a horror novel, in a way. And, I mean, it's frightening stuff. But the point is, we read in front of everybody. And so we were totally, that was a part of our healing process, to, like, own the story and have no shame about it. And we told our girls. I mean, our girls, we have 3 daughters, 12, 14, and 17. And so obviously they were there for it. They know that their mom moved out, and when she moved back, she sat them down and she goes, "Well, I'm so sorry that we've been doing this to you all." Like, and it obviously was a lot of crying. And she said, "I had an affair with our next door neighbor. You remember him?" And they were like, "The old lady next door?" And she was like, "No, our other house. Our other house." So they know the story. And it's obviously a lot for them to process. So they're in therapy as well right now, which we think is really important. There's a lot in the last chapter about the importance of therapy. And I do believe you have to tell your story to your friends, to your priest, to your hairdresser, to somebody. You've got to get it out. Or the bad things in your story will turn on you, and they will destroy your life, and they will destroy your relationships. I talk about therapy like, being a Southern man who grew up in the rural South, rural Mississippi, it was hard for me to want to go to therapy at first. For all the reasons, like, I don't even need to just explain it to you guys. You get it. You're like, if you go to church, that's all you need, or a real man doesn't need somebody else to solve his problems. But the way I look at it now, it's more like dentistry. We didn't have dentists for thousands of years. I don't know why we didn't have them. Maybe we didn't need them. But, like, we have dentists now, right? When you go to a dentist, like, every man in here, I'm going to pick on the men. Like, if you go to a dentist, nobody's being like, "Well, I'll fix my own teeth." You go to the dentist because, why? We live longer than we used to, right? The teeth have to last a lot longer than they used to. Our foods are a lot richer in sugar and other things. And so they get a lot more wear and tear. We need somebody to fix our teeth, like we need people to fix our cars. And I feel very strongly that we need people to help fix our marriages. People are married way longer than they used to be historically. We live longer than we used to. The pressures, I'm not saying it's harder now than it used to be, or it was harder then than it is now. Like, the pressures are so much more complex on marriages, economically, who's doing what. Like, my grandparents in Tate County, in Coldwater, Mississippi, my grandmother did inside things, and my grandfather did outside things. Why? Well, there was a lot of outside things to do. They had about 50 acres. And there was a lot of work in there to do, and there was a lot of work in the house. They both had a lot of work to do, and it was a separation of powers, and everything it seemed to work well back then. Well, there's not as much outside stuff for people to do now, right? There's a lot more inside the house. All the outside stuff is inside now. And so it's hard for men to figure that out. Like, what's their role in that? Women do. I'm totally going to get in trouble for, like, gender stereotypes, but I don't care. I'm famous and rich. But, like, in my experience, I'll say many of the women in my family, I'll say that, are really good at running the home. They are the cruise director of that ship. And they know what's going on and when it's going on and who's doing what. They know all the medicines that the children take. They know all the teachers' names, right? Are you with me? Is everybody with me? Okay. I don't know that, right? Because I've delegated that to my wife. And so when my wife left, guess what? I had to figure it all out. And as I was doing that, I'm like, is this why she left? Because I didn't know where the broom was. I'm very smart. But I made all the money. My wife didn't work outside the home, and so I thought that was my role, is to I'll do that, and she does this, and together we're very strong. And that was not right at all, because I didn't understand anything she was going through. And to my credit, she didn't really understand anything I was going through. It was so separate that we really didn't even have the same vocabulary. And so when she's gone, I was really excited that, because before we separated, when I would try to help, and I'm not saying all women are like this, but when I would try to help, I would help wrong. And my wife would make a face. And you know what I said? I was like, fine, you do it. I would cook the wrong thing, and buy the wrong thing at the grocery store, and put the wrong smock dresses on the kids, fine. And I was like, so it gave me, warrant to do even less and to become even more separate. And so when she left, it was like the wildest video game. I was like, I had got to figure so much out so quickly. Where do y'all go to school? I would ask my children. I'd pull the panties out of the dryer and be like, y'all are all three different sizes, but the panties are all the same. And they wore them so much that all the sizes, so I started writing on Sharpies. I'd write their first initial and all. They're like, Daddy, stop writing on the panties. I'm like, nobody sees these panties but me. I hope. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. So now when she came back, so I did, one thing I did, and I talk about this in the book, I completely redecorated the interior of the home. So wives, if you're thinking about leaving your husbands, imagine that. I was like, I work at a design school in Savannah. I love design. I love art. And so I was like, she's gone. I can do whatever I want with this house. I go try to hang up I have a portrait of Teen Wolf that I love. It's a watercolor. It's beautiful. And she would never let me hang it. And I was like, wait. I can hang this thing wherever. I can put this thing in the kitchen if I want to. So she's gone, and my children are like, what are you doing, Daddy? I'm like, just go to school, and I would hang all this art. My wife, I talk about this too in the book, my wife hates hooks. I love hooks. Hanging stuff on hooks, backpacks, shoes, clothes, babies. I'll hang all of it on a hook. So I bought hooks for every room in the house. And so when she moved back, it was so awesome. She walked in, and she was like, wow. And I was like, she was like, so many hooks. And I was like, I know. And I dared her to take them down. I was like, I think you owe me this one. So we still have all the hooks around.
Now, I could listen to Harrison talk all night, but I know that you guys want to get your book signed. You probably want to get the new one and think about someone you want to give it to, and you need to get the 2 earlier ones too. And I want you to know, if you were like, how can I get more Harrison's Got Key in my life? He's going to be on a fabulous panel at the Mississippi Book Festival in Jackson on August 20th. If you haven't made your way down to the Mississippi Book Festival, it's our 9th year. The festival is free. And he's going to be on the panel. I'm moderating about marriage in memoir. That includes Helen Ellis, Maggie Smith, and Hannah Petard. But Ann Patch is going to be there, Richard Ford, etc. So you should buy their books here at Square Books and then read them and come down and see us in Jackson. Let's have one more big hand for Harrison.
So I'll go sign. So come say hey.